Okay, think about this for a second. You've got a world-famous musician, a powerful, game-changing activist, and a university professor of mathematics? What on earth could these three people possibly have in common? I mean, on the surface, it seems like absolutely nothing. But they all made the exact same life-altering choice. And their stories, well, they open a window into one of the most fascinating and misunderstood religious trends of our time. So let's dig in and explore the unseen journeys that led them to this place.
First up, we have a man who basically wrote the soundtrack for a generation. We're talking about a chart-topping, stadium-selling rock star who had all the fame, all the money, everything the world tell you is supposed to make you happy. But his story is really about what happens when you have it all and you're still searching for something more. Next, a man whose voice literally shook the foundations of a nation. Just an incredibly fiery, brilliant activist who became one of the most powerful and, controversial figures in the American civil rights movement. His journey was one of constant transformation. And finally, we've got an academic, a professor of mathematics at the University of Kansas. Now, this is a guy who lived in a world of pure logic, of hard evidence, of mathematical certainty. He was a committed atheist, and for him, if you couldn't prove it with reason, it just wasn't real, period.
And here's the reveal. The rock star, the activist, the mathematician, they all, completely independently of one another, found a new path in Islam. And when you start to really look at why they converted, you uncover a side of this faith that almost never makes the headlines. Their stories show us there are these distinct pathways people take: journeys of the mind, journeys of the heart, and journeys of the soul.
So let's start with the first pathway. And this is one that might actually surprise you: the path of pure reason. For a lot of highly educated Westerners, the journey to Islam wasn't some blind leap of faith. Actually, it was the exact opposite. It was the end of a long, logical search. Take Professor Jeffrey Lang, the mathematician we mentioned. Being an atheist, he started reading the Quran specifically to find flaws, to debunk it. But he described this really bizarre experience. He said he felt like the book was actively arguing with him, like it was anticipating his very specific intellectual doubts and just dismantling them one by one. For him, it wasn't just a text he was reading, it felt like a dialogue. And Lang's experience isn't some one-off thing. The Quran itself, over and over again, commands its readers to think, to ponder, to use their reason. Many scholars find a faith that doesn't ask them to believe in spite of their intellect, but actually through it. The big takeaway here is that for some people, converting to Islam is simply the most logical conclusion to their search for truth. But of course, logic and evidence, that's only one part of what makes us human, right? For every search for proof, there's an equally powerful search for purpose. And that moves us from the questions we ask with our minds to the deep needs of the soul. And this brings us to that second path, the search for meaning. This is the journey of people who've climbed the ladder of worldly success. They've gotten everything they thought they wanted, only to find that the view from the top feels, well, kind of empty. It's about that spiritual void that fame and fortune just can't fill. Hey, remember that musician from the beginning? That was Cat Stevens, who is now known as Yusuf Islam. At the absolute peak of his fame, he nearly drowned off the coast of Malibu. It was a terrifying, life-changing crisis. And it led him to the Quran, where he said he found not some complicated theology, but a simple, powerful, and direct connection to God, something that all of his success had totally failed to give him. And this is a theme you hear from so many converts. It's the profound simplicity of it all, worshiping one God with no one and nothing in between. It's the physical act of prayer, placing your forehead on the ground in a moment of pure surrender. And it's that radical sense of equality that Malcolm X witnessed on his pilgrimage to Mecca, seeing people of all colors and classes, from kings to peasants, standing shoulder to shoulder as total equals. It's finding a global family.
But here's the thing. These conversion stories, as powerful as they often leave out the hardest part of the journey. Because the initial declaration of faith, the Shahada, that's one thing. Living it day in and day out in the real world, that is another thing entirely. This quote, you see it all the time in convert circles, and it just perfectly captures the hidden reality for so many. That initial euphoria of finding the truth, it's amazing, but it can be followed by a long and sometimes very difficult road of just trying to fit in and learn.
So what does that road actually look like? Well, for many, it means facing rejection from family and friends who just don't understand. It can mean hitting what they call the convert crash. That's when the initial warm welcome from the community fades and a real sense of isolation can creep in.
And it means the constant struggle of trying to figure out what's actually part of the religion and what's just the complex, sometimes contradictory cultural traditions of people who were born into it.
And listen, this isn't just a feeling people have. There's data to back it up. Studies suggest that while most converts do remain Muslim, a pretty significant chunk, we're talking up to a quarter, maybe even more, end up leaving Islam within a few years. And they often cite things like a lack of real, sustained community support and that feeling of cultural alienation. So yeah, the journey definitely doesn't end with that first declaration of faith. So when we zoom out and look at the big picture, what does this whole trend of Western conversion, with all its beauty and all its challenges, what does it really tell us about Islam's place in the modern world?
You know, what's really remarkable is where these conversions are happening, right in the heart of the West. People aren't choosing Islam in spite of their Western education and critical thinking skills, but often because of them. This trend really pushes back against that popular, simplistic narrative you always hear about a clash of civilizations, that Islam and the West are somehow fundamentally incompatible. And maybe the ultimate lesson in all of this is about what truly draws people to a faith. It's almost never a pamphlet or a clever debate. Overwhelmingly, if you ask converts, they'll tell you they were first attracted to the character of a Muslim they knew, a friend, a coworker, a neighbor. It turns out the most powerful invitation, or dawah as it's called, isn't an argument. It's a life lived with integrity and kindness. And so, after hearing all these personal stories, we're left with one final big question. In a world that is so saturated with negative headlines and fear about Islam, what is it that these converts are seeing? What beauty, what logic, and what sense of peace are they finding in this faith that so many others seem to miss?